and a very warm welcome to all of you listening. I hope that you are all fit and well. You join me today for sermon number 39 in our series examining the book of Daniel. Today we are continuing on from where we left off in chapter number 11. Today we shall be looking at verses 9 to 19. So our reading then is Daniel chapter 11 verses 9 to 19. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife, and assemble a multitude of great forces. And one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage, and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound, and take a fortified city. And the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. He shall also set his face to enter with the great strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or before him. After this he shall return his face to the coastlands, and shall take many. But a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. This is the word of the Lord. Last time we began our examination of chapter number 11. As I noted to you then, it contains one of the most detailed and precise prophecies contained within the pages of Scripture. The historic references are so accurate that many critical scholars have questioned whether what we are actually reading here is indeed a prophecy. How, they ask, could Daniel know these things with such precision? Naturally, these critics cannot just accept the fact that a supernatural God revealed them to Daniel. They need, you see, a natural explanation. As a result, these critics claim that what we are reading was written long after these events had transpired. It is therefore more accurately known as a pseudo-prophecy, a retelling or explaining of historic events long after they have occurred. This, of course, helps explain how the writer could have such pinpoint accuracy. The problem is, however, that embracing such a worldview undermines the credibility of the writer, and more importantly, of the God who we believe inspired the writer. We don't hold that Daniel was like Nostradamus, simply predicting the future. We maintain that God, who knows the beginning from the end, revealed the truth to him through the angel. Fulfilled prophecy is given to us as proof that we serve and worship a God who both knows and is sovereign over time and the affairs of his creation. To deny this is to call into question who God is. This is why we strongly deny the claims made by such critics who say that Daniel was written by an unknown writer in the 2nd century. We believe that the book of Daniel was written by the prophet Daniel in the 6th century BC. Now, I probably overwhelmed you last time with quite a lot of ancient history. I introduced you to a whole host of historic figures, some of whom had funny or unpronounceable names. So before we move on with the prophecy today, let me briefly remind you of some of the main points. The prophecy as presented by the angel begins after the reign of King Cyrus the Great. After his death, 3 other Persian kings will arise. We know them to be Cambyses, Pseudo-Smerdis, and Darius the First. After these 3 monarchs will come a richer and more powerful ruler. This is a reference to King Xerxes the First. Exactly as predicted, he was stronger than his predecessors. He also had a burning ambition to attack and conquer Greece, an endeavour in which he was to be unsuccessful. After Xerxes the First, the angel speaks of a mighty king who will arise and rule exactly as he wishes or wills. This is a reference to Alexander the Great. Around 150 years after the time of Xerxes the First, Alexander rose to prominence. We know from history that he was a highly successful ruler and that he ruled, albeit briefly, over a vast empire. Sadly, when he died at the age of 32 in the year of 323 BC, he had no heir, and as a consequence his empire was divided up amongst 4 of his top generals, Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. From this point on, the prophecy will shift to focus on the exploits of just 2 of these generals and the empires that they founded. The reason for this is because this prophecy is concerned primarily with God's people and what will happen to them. This means that we are concerned only with the Seleucid Empire, located to the north of Israel, and to the Ptolemaic Empire, located to the south. These 2 empires had a bitter rivalry and were frequently engaged in conflict as they attempted to conquer territory or capture possessions belonging to the other. The prophecy goes on to speak of how Ptolemy I helped Seleucus I stay in power in Babylon. He supported him against those seeking to depose him. It also highlights how Seleucus I would go on to rule over a dominion greater in size than the Empire of the South. We also looked last time at the attempt that was made to forge peace between these 2 empires. This was done, or at least attempted, through the marriage union of Berenice, the daughter of Ptolemy II, to Antiochus II. Sadly, this peaceful union was not to last. When Ptolemy II died, Antiochus left Berenice to rejoin his former wife, Laodice. Laodice was a vengeful woman, and she, or her supporters at her command, had Berenice and her young son murdered. As we might well imagine, Berenice's family were most unhappy at this turn of events. Her brother Ptolemy III swore that he would avenge her death. He led his forces north and captured a vast quantity of booty, along with some religious idols which he carried back to the south. Following this raid or attack, an uneasy peace existed until Seleucus II decided to seek revenge. He launched an attack in 240 BC. He was to be unsuccessful and later died when he fell off his horse. He was, exactly as the prophecy predicted, outlived by Ptolemy III, all of which, of course, the angel told Daniel. Well, today we will continue on with our examination of this amazingly accurate prophecy. Verse number 9. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. Now, last time I spoke of how Seleucus II, the king of the north, sought to attack the Ptolemaic Empire ruled by Ptolemy III, the king of the south. Seleucus wanted to restore the honour and glory of his empire as well as recapturing some of the booty and religious idols that were taken by Ptolemy III. You see, in the ancient world, the gods of your nation were represented by the idols that you set up in their shrines or other holy places. To have these idol images taken by an enemy force was terrible humiliation, both for you as a nation and for your God. It meant that you had lost the idol before whom you were to make your offerings and worship, and that you also risked the ire of the god whose image you had let be captured. So Seleucus wanted his idols back. The raid, however, was to prove unsuccessful. Although Seleucus was able to take his forces into Egypt, he was not able to hold the land or to take back what had been taken. He was forced to return empty-handed to his own land in the north. However, as we shall see, the Seleucid fortunes are about to change. Let us read on. Verse number 10. However, his son shall stir up strife, and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. Seleucus II had two sons. Their names were Seleucus III Soter and Antiochus III Magnus. His first son, Seleucus III, reigned for only a brief time. He was not a popular ruler. It was said that he lacked character and was a weak and sickly man. Not really the kind of man that ancient people wanted as their monarch. He was assassinated after ruling for just 2 years. It was then the second son, Antiochus III, who would go on to greatness. Antiochus III would come to be known as Antiochus the Great, although we might add at this point that this was a term that he coined for himself. He also referred to himself as Basilius Megas, meaning Great King. So we might say that he was rather far from being a humble or demure individual. The prophecy predicts that he would assemble a great military force, and this is indeed what happened. He put together an army of 75,000 men and made multiple attacks against Egypt, the Ptolemaic Empire. As he made his way south, Antiochus captured city after city in the regions of modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. In that sense, he overwhelmed and passed through on his way towards Egypt in the south. Although he never actually conquered Egypt itself, he did push their borders back. Prior to the time of Antiochus III, the northern border of Egypt had been Syria, but after his campaign, it was the southern border of Israel. The verse concludes by saying that he returned to his fortress. This is most likely the fortress in Raphia, an Egyptian outpost on the Palestine frontier. And this will be the site of the battle that we will read about in the next verse. Verses 11 and 12. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage, and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. As the large army, led by Antiochus III, was making its way south, you may wonder what the king in Egypt was doing. Now you'd like to think that he was busy gathering his forces and preparing to counter-attack. The man on the throne at this time was Ptolemy IV Philopator. History depicts this man as being lazy, ineffective, and inept. The Encyclopaedia Britannica described him as being feeble. He was frequently criticized at the time for being more interested in luxury and court ceremony than government politics and foreign relations. It is for these reasons that he is often regarded as the king who began the decline of the Ptolemaic kingdom. However, even this less than stellar leader could not sit back and do nothing in the face of a northern invasion. He was, as we read here, moved with rage. He assembled an army which, according to the ancient historian Polybius, comprised 70,000 foot soldiers, 5,000 cavalry, and 500 war elephants. When this army was ready, they marched north to engage the enemy. The battle took place in Raphia in the year of 217 BC. The armies of the north and south that took the field that day were fairly well matched. The battle that ensued would go on to be one of the biggest battles that took place in the ancient world. You may also be interested to learn the following detail. The Battle of Raphia is also known as the Battle of the Elephants. This is because it is the only known battle from the ancient world in which both sides used war elephants. The Ptolemaic forces prevailed. The Seleucid army suffered a crushing defeat and fled. According again to Polybius, they lost 10,000 foot soldiers, 300 cavalry, and 102 elephants. Additionally, 4,000 men were taken as prisoners. The success of this victory went to Ptolemy's head. As we read in the prophecy, his heart was lifted up. Assuming that his kingdom was now safe, he did not press home his advantage. He was content to acquire all of Palestine and not advance any further. He returned back to his palace to wallow in excess and luxury. So, just as the prophecy predicted, he did not prevail in the sense that he pushed on to complete the victory over the north. Well, let us continue. Verses 13 and 14. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. As we've just seen, Antiochus III suffered a serious setback at the Battle of Raphia. However, this did not massively dent his ambitions. Over the next decade, he turned his attentions both east and north with considerable success. He rebuilt his military and prepared them for a time when they might return to avenge themselves against the south. An opportune moment came when Ptolemy IV died in 204 BC. He was succeeded to the throne by his 6-year-old son, Ptolemy V Epiphanes. This was the perfect time to strike, and so Antiochus led his large and well-equipped army south. He was, as we read here in verse 14, not alone. The many allies who joined him included King Philip V of Macedonia, and also a considerable number of zealous Israelites. They are referred to here as the violent men of your people. In other Bible translations, this term is rendered as robbers. The Hebrew term that's used here means sons of breaking or children of breaking. It refers to people who don't keep their promises. More simply, I suppose, we might refer to such people as rebels or law-breakers. In reality, these men were strong-willed Jewish revolutionaries, Jewish mercenaries with a cause. They desired Judean independence and believed that this could be achieved if Antiochus prevailed. It was a vain and foolish hope. As we shall read in the end of verse 14, they shall fall. This means that despite their best efforts, these men will fail to win back their land. So picture the scene. All these allies with their differing aspirations or motivations, united in their hatred of the Ptolemaic Empire, marching south. Who will prevail, north or south? Well, let's read on and find out. Verses 15 and 16. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound, and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. The angel tells Daniel that the king of the north, in this case Antiochus III, will come and build a siege mound. This instantly tells us that a siege was taking place. Let me tell you a little about how sieges can be managed. The side initiating the siege has two options: to be passive or aggressive. They can decide to surround the city or fortress and simply wait for those inside to give in. This is the passive approach. This, of course, can take a very long time and means that you have to find supplies for your own troops. Alternatively, you can attack those inside and hope to break through the walls and bring things to a more rapid conclusion. This is the aggressive approach. There are a number of ways that you could go about doing this. You could attempt an assault against the walls. Alternatively, you can dig tunnels beneath them and hope to weaken the foundations. You could try using a battering ram to break through, or build a siege mound. On this occasion, a siege mound is the preferred option. Siege mounds were hills or ramps built out of dirt, rubble, or wood. When an army was attacking a walled city or fortress, they proved to be very useful. Having an elevated mound enabled the attackers to get closer to the walls in order to destroy them or more effectively attack the enemy inside. In this case, Antiochus III utilizes a mound to capture a fortified city. The city in question was most probably Sidon. This ancient port city, lying about 25 miles south of Beirut, was an important gateway to the south. The Egyptian forces were unable to repel the attacks, and the fortress ultimately fell. This included Ptolemy's elite troops. Ancient armies would often have units of highly trained special soldiers. These well-equipped units would be given the task of protecting important people, guarding valuable places, or achieving a breakthrough in a military struggle. However, on this particular occasion, even these elite fighting men could not withstand the Seleucid attacks. After this important city was captured, it allowed the Seleucid forces to establish a foothold in the area. Once this base was established, Antiochus was virtually unstoppable. In 198 BC, Antiochus's forces overcame the Egyptian garrison in Jerusalem, and this left him in firm control of Palestine, including the area of Judea. This means that he was able to stand in the glorious land. But note carefully who it is standing in the glorious land. The he is, of course, Antiochus III. The Jewish zealots had sided with him, but things had not gone exactly as they had desired. He did not give them the land and the freedom that their hearts desired. I shall speak more on this subject in my closing. Well, let's continue. Verse 17. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or before him. Once what had formerly been Israel was under his control, Antiochus III set his face as regards Egypt. This expression means to make a firm decision to do or achieve something. We use a similar term today in English when we say, "I've set my mind." It means that we are determined, no matter what, to do a certain thing. In this instance, Antiochus was set on capturing Egypt. However, before he could do this, there were other more pressing issues to deal with. Coupled with this were threats coming from Rome. They were not happy about his plans to attack their allies in the region. So Antiochus decided upon an interesting plan. He proposed a peace plan. This would be sealed and assured with, you guessed it, a marriage union. Antiochus arranged for his daughter Cleopatra I, not the one you're thinking of, that was Cleopatra the Seventh, to marry Ptolemy the Fifth, Epiphanes, the king of Egypt. Ptolemy, as you will recall, became king at the age of 6. He was just 16 when this marriage was arranged in 195 BC. Now Antiochus hoped that his daughter would either act to manipulate things in the way that he wished, or alternatively to act as his spy. She could report back to him on what the enemy were doing. It was a good plan. What could possibly go wrong? Well, one simple 4-letter word: love. Cleopatra loved her husband more than her father, and she failed to cooperate with his cunning plan to manipulate Egypt. Despite her father's urgings, she remained completely loyal to her husband and to her new country. This meant that she stood stolidly behind a plan to create an alliance between Egypt and the rising Roman power. This was exactly as the prophecy predicted. She, Cleopatra, would not stand with or for her father. In practice, this meant that Antiochus' scheme to dominate and eventually control Egypt failed. Well, let's conclude our study for today. Verses 18 and 19. After this he shall turn his face to the coastlands, and shall take many. But a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Antiochus III was greatly disappointed that his scheme to take Egypt had failed. But he was a man of action, and therefore determined to go after other territory. He attacked Egyptian colonies in Asia Minor, and settled 2,000 families from Mesopotamia in Lydia and Phrygia. With this complete, he then looked toward Greece. Greece, as you probably know, is an area famous for its many coastlines. Initially in this he enjoyed a number of successes, but this was only for a short time. The Romans were not about to let someone invade and capture their land or harass their allies. They therefore rallied their troops. Part of the Roman success lay in the prowess of their navy. The Romans soon gained naval dominance. Their ships and fighting techniques were superior. The Seleucid navy was outmatched in every encounter. The Romans won decisive naval battles in the Straits of Thermopylae, at Phocia, and at Milesus. The Romans were also victorious on land, most notably at the battles of Thermopylae in 191 BC and at Mount Sipylus in 190 BC. The Romans then sent the general Lucius Cornelius Scipio Asiaticus to drive Antiochus back. Scipio defeated him at the Battle of Magnesia in 190 or 189 BC and forced him permanently to the east. The might of the Roman forces was such that Antiochus was eventually forced to agree to peace terms in the year 188 BC. This was known as the Treaty of Apamea. The terms for peace included being forced to pay restitution to Rome for his attacks, giving up all the captured land, disbanding the navy, and the use of war elephants. He was also made to leave his son Mithridates as a political hostage. This boy would eventually grow up to become Antiochus IV Epiphanes. So exactly as prophesied, someone, in this case Scipio and other Roman generals, would come along and put an end to Antiochus III's reproach or contempt. Verse 19 tells us of the fate of Antiochus III. After his humiliating defeat in Asia Minor, he was forced to return home. Certainly Antiochus III had earned his title of Great due to his impressive military victories. Had he been content with his gains across Asia, his reputation would have been secure. However, his pride and arrogance propelled him on. He was determined to capture Greece and take on the might of Rome. His overreach and failure in Asia Minor caused major problems in his empire. It led to further rebellions among conquered territories and reduced Antiochus's power. The death of this great figure in history is far from being a fitting end to a mighty leader. In the year 187 BC, he was assassinated by a mob as he was looting a temple of Baal in Susa to pay tribute to Rome. He shall indeed stumble and fall, exactly as the angel predicted. Well, next week, Lord willing, we will continue on with the angel's prophecy. Lessons to learn. I have 2 lessons drawn from today's passage. Number 1, siding with the enemy. As we saw in today's account, some of the most patriotic and zealous Jews of the day decided to support the Seleucids. They were tired of being under the crushing boot of the Ptolemaic Empire. Life, they thought, would be better for them if the Seleucids were in charge. They might even be allowed to enjoy some freedom and get to practice their religion. Therefore they joined them in the conquest of the south, and presumably fought and died to help the Seleucids win. Or, to put it more crudely, they joined one group who hated and wanted to repress them against another group they thought were even worse. And what was the reward for their blood, sweat and tears? Absolutely nothing. Not surprisingly, when it came time for their enemy to reward them for their efforts, they were less than forthcoming. The Jews' dreams of liberation and freedom vanished before their eyes. Today, Christians are sometimes tempted, just like the Jews were, to side with the enemy. We might think that life will be better or easier, or that we can have greater degree of success if we unite. Let me give you an example. On many cultural issues, Christianity and Islam seem to converge. We seem to share similar viewpoints. For example, both religions oppose homosexual acts, same-sex marriage, and abortion. Both religions promote the importance of strong families. Both religions are against the use of mind-altering drugs in a recreational setting. So one might argue that with these shared values that we ought to be able to work together. We could join forces, for example, to oppose abortion. Wouldn't we be far more effective if we combined our forces? Politically speaking, we'd have a louder voice that politicians would be forced to listen to. I'm sure that the Jews had similar kinds of discussions when they considered whether to side with the Seleucids or not. They chose badly, because even if your enemy smiles sweetly and offers you a box of chocolates, they are still your enemy. We share this planet with many other religions. The world, which is Satan's domain, will try and say that they are all equally valid ways of approaching the divine. You may even hear people say the very foolish statement that Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Yahweh and Allah are not the same. So as to whether Christians and Muslims can or should work together, my answer is that they cannot. That is, of course, not to say that we should hate Muslims and treat them badly. Far from it. They are precious people created in the image of God. Therefore they deserve our love and compassion. Most importantly, they need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. However, we cannot work with them because beyond the very superficial similarities that we share, we are fundamentally different. We differ on the most important issues. Who is God? What is he like? How is a person saved? How does God want us to live? The truth is that we can never truly be united because they are wrong about our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. Ask yourself the question about how such a union would work in practice. Who will compromise? Who will back down on what they believe? No born-again Christian would, and neither would a devout Muslim. This is why we cannot side with Islam. Therefore we must be very careful with who we align ourselves. We do not want to follow the example of the Jews, who sided with the Seleucids in the hope of being rewarded and ended up with nothing. We are on Christ's side. He is the truth, and it is to him and him alone that we are to be united. Number 2. Beware of selfish ambition. At what point does ambition turn into over-ambition? Well, that's a tough question to answer. As we saw in today's account, Antiochus III allowed his pride to come before reason, and he became over-ambitious. Instead of settling for what he had gained, he went too far. Had he stopped in Asia and consolidated what he had won, he would have still have been considered great, and he might have ruled happily for many more years. But he would not settle for this. He wanted to be more than great, and paid a heavy price. When we were young, we had certain dreams or ambitions. Ambition in the young is seen as a good thing. I often ask my young students what they want to be in the future, and I expect a certain degree of ambition in their answers. They tell me things like, I want to be a judge, an astronaut, a soccer player, an actor, or a diplomat. These are jobs worth aspiring after, and I'd probably consider an answer of, I want to be a shop worker, a road sweeper, or a bus driver, as somewhat lacking in ambition, although of course these jobs are important and need to be done. But again, when does over-ambition appear? When do we need to measure and modify reality with ambition? We like to tell the young that they can be whatever they want to be, but that's not really true. We need to balance dreams with the realistic possibility of attaining them. Is it possible, for example, that a short, non-athletic student will play basketball in the NBA? Probably not. In our Christian lives, we also need to be aware of possible over-ambition. There is only so much that one person, one church, or one organization can do. Now, of course, we must always factor in God and how He might choose to help. With God, after all things are possible. This is true, but equally we need to be aware of what lies behind our ambition. Are we seeking things for God's glory, or are we selfish and self-centered in our ambitions? The Bible frequently cautions against selfish ambition, which is ambition driven by self-interest rather than the glory of God or the good of others. Do we want people to come to our church because we can boast about the size of our congregation? That would be a selfish ambition. Or do we want people to come because God will get the glory when we share the gospel with them? That's a good ambition. Do we want to study God's word so that we can boast about our knowledge or impress others at the Bible study? That's just selfish. Or do we want to immerse ourselves in God's word because it draws us closer to Him and pleases Him when we do so? That would be a good ambition. We also need to be aware of ambition when it comes to wealth. The desire or ambition for money or material possessions can often be a snare in our lives. We have all been greatly blessed by God in so many ways. Let us then be grateful and content with His bounty. Let us be aware of greed or over-ambition, particularly in the area of wealth. In conclusion, may we all learn through the guidance and wisdom of the Holy Spirit to live in well-balanced ways. O Lord, we pray for your wisdom, that the ambitions that we have are not leading us in a selfish direction. May we instead be concerned about bringing glory to you and not ourselves. May we all desire to serve others well and seek to live good, God-pleasing lives.
Also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up, and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these. Also the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power over him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And at the end of some years they shall join forces. For the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand. But she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. But from a branch of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them, and prevail. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also, the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife, and assemble a multitude of great forces. And one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage, and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now, in those times, many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also, violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound, and take a fortified city. And the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it. But she shall not stand with him, or be for him. After this he shall turn his face to the coastlands, and shall take many. But a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end. And with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. There shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom. But within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. And in his place shall arise a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty. But he shall come in peaceably, and seize the kingdom by intrigue. With the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him, and be broken. And also the prince of the covenant. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, for he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. He shall enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province, and he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, spoil, and riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. While returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant. So he shall do damage and return to his own land. At the appointed time he shall return and go toward the south. But it shall not be like the former or the latter. For ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved, and return in rage against the holy covenant, and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant, and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery. But the people who know their God shall be strong, and carry out great exploits. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now, when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help. But many shall join with them by intrigue, and some of those of understanding shall fall to refine them, purify them, and make them white, until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. Then the king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished. For what has been determined shall be done. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a god of fortresses, and a god which his fathers did not know he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape from his hand: Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him.